So for iOS setup, we can go back to the Firebase messaging package page, and there you got the iOS integration steps. Now it looks short, but actually you got a few steps that you need to perform here. For example, you need to generate certificates required by Apple for receiving push notifications. Again, for that identification part, where you're basically telling Apple, hey, that's me, I'm the creator of the app, and here's my proof. Now you can follow this guide, as you can see, to configure that. And that takes us to the official Firebase Cloud Messaging docs. Now here you should go through the first two steps, but you can skip the create the provisioning profile step, as is also mentioned here. So let's go through the other steps then. And the first step is that we create an authentication key. For that, we need to have an Apple developer account and log into that. So you can search for Apple developer or Apple developer account and find their Apple developer page and log in there with your Apple ID. Now, once you did log in, you should go to Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles, and under Keys, select All, as you can tell. So let's go there. Go to Keys, and there simply click on plus. That all part is not required, for me at least here. I can just click on plus to create a new key. Now, I did that, therefore. And now we should enter a description for the APN's auth key. And under Key Services, select the APN's checkbox and click Continue. So here, in the end, we want to check this APNS checkbox, which basically says that we want to generate a key, which we can use to send push notifications. And we should give this a name, like flutter chat example, something like this. And once you did all of that, you can click confirm and then download and then save this key in a secure place, because that will be a key which we will soon provide through Firebase Cloud Messaging to Apple for every message we want to send that message. So anyone with that key could cause harm to your application and could abuse it. So store it in a secure place. Don't just put it onto your desktop. Don't upload it to a GitHub repository. Store it in a place where only you have access to. Also note that it's a one-time download and you can't retrieve the key later. So make sure you don't lose it. So let's click on continue here, register. And here we got the same warning that we can only download it once. So let me now download this key. And I'm storing this in some folder on my system now where no one else has access to. So that's the key downloaded. The next step now is that we create an app ID. So that is basically an identifier that uniquely identifies our application. And there we use this reversed domain notation here, which we also use for our bundle identifier. For that, go to the Apple Developer Member Center and log in. You should already be logged in by now. And then click on Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles. So where we just were, essentially. And in there, navigate to Identifiers, App IDs. So Identifiers, and then here, we got App IDs, as you can tell. And we want to add a new identifier here. So the plus button was clicked. Now, that new app ID has a name, which is basically a human readable name, and a team ID. So let's generate this app ID here. Continue. Give it your description, like flutter chat example. Your team ID should already be selected here. And now choose a bundle ID here and choose explicit, as it also says here, and then input your bundle ID, which you also have in your application, and that's important. It has to be the same one. So in your iOS runner folder, you have the info plist file, and in there, that bundle ID is inserted by Flutter in the end. Now, if you're not sure what your actual ID is, therefore, you can simply open your project in Xcode, so that iOS folder of your Flutter project in Xcode, and there, under General, it's this bundle identifier I'm talking about. Grab this bundle identifier. Now, important, before you continue, you should scroll down here and check push notifications to make it clear that this app intends to use push notifications. That's also what you find here in the docs, that you should check push notifications. Thereafter, we can continue and verify our inputs and click register. Now, as mentioned, you can skip the create provisioning profile part here. Also worth a note, of course, your bundle identifier should be one that's not already taken. For example, I changed mine to com Academine Flutter Complete Guide. Academine is my company, because com example Flutter Complete Guide was already taken. If that happens for you, you have to change it here to something unique, so to your company name and then some identifier, for example, and then also re-add your project on Firebase. So remove your existing iOS project here and re-add it as shown at the beginning of the module. It's super simple and not the end of the world. So once all of that is done, we can skip that create the provisioning profile step. And therefore now we're done with step 1 here in the iOS integration. No worries, the other steps will be faster. For example, we already finished step 2. We linked our project to Firebase already, so we don't need to do this again. Now here in Xcode, we now need to configure something though. We need to select Runner in the Project Navigator, and then in the Capabilities tab, we should turn on push notifications and background modes, and enable background fetch and remote notifications. So here in Xcode, click on Runner, and under Signing and Capabilities, click on Plus Capability, and choose Push Notifications here. Double click on it. Now also click on that again and choose background modes. And on background modes, then enable remote notifications and background fetch. These are the two things you should enable here. Next, let's follow the steps here under Upload your APNS certificate in the Firebase docs. This is required because the Firebase Cloud Messaging Service in the end just talks to Apple's push notification service. And therefore we need to make sure that FCM, Firebase Cloud Messaging, is able to talk to those servers and is able to provide our identification criteria, so our key, to those servers. So we already set up our iOS client. We already added Firebase to our iOS project. We registered our app with Firebase, so that all happened. Hence now our next step is that we upload our APNS authentication key, so that key we generated a few minutes ago. And for that, go to your Firebase console and under Project Settings, go to Cloud Messaging. So here, click on Project Settings on that gear icon and then Project Settings, and then go to the Cloud Messaging tab and scroll down to your iOS app configuration, and there you need that APNS auth key. Click on Upload here, well, to upload it, and browse for that key file you downloaded a few minutes ago. So here is my key, and I will open it here, and then in order to upload it, you need to enter your key ID and your team ID. Now you find both under Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles. Here is the key ID, which of course is different for you, but you can grab it from that page. This was not deleted after your download, so you can still access this. And your team ID. This is the ID you find here in the top right corner. So insert both here and click on Upload, and it should store your key here. So that were the steps 2 and 3 here in that documentation we're currently going through. Now we need to initialize Firebase in our app, but that's something we can skip because we're using the Firebase Flutter SDKs. We can skip all of that. And we can also skip that entire part for handling the messages because we're going to do all of that with help of that Flutter package here. Indeed, as it says here, we just needed to upload our APNS certificate. Only that part need to be completed, and that is that part we just had a look at. So therefore, we're done with step 4. We can ignore step 5 here. And with that, we're therefore done with the iOS setup here, though now we also need to do something in our Flutter code. Because whilst we are able to just start sending messages on Android and we didn't need any Flutter code, that's not the case here. For iOS, we need to request permissions first, and therefore we need to write some code to do that before we'll be able to send notifications to our iOS device and see them there. So to do that, let's pick a good place, and I will just go for, let's say, the chat screen. I could ask on the main Dart file, but if a user hasn't even logged in, it doesn't make much sense to start sending messages to that user. So instead here in the chat screen, I want to ask the user whether he's fine with me sending push notifications to him or her. Now to ask for permissions, I will convert chat screen here to a state full widget, simply because now I have this extra lifecycle hook which I can use here, the init state function. So here we can now write our own extra code. And that's where I want to ask for permission. So that will ask whenever this comes up, whenever that opens up. For that, let's import this package which we added earlier, the Firebase messaging package, and there the Firebase messaging Dart file. And in init state here, we can now access Firebase messaging and instantiate it like this. There is no instance property as on the other Firebase Flutter packages. Here we have to instantiate it like this. And we can store this in a variable or in a constant to be precise. I'll name it FBM for Firebase messaging. And on FBM, we can now call request notification permissions. Now on Android, this will do nothing, but on iOS, it will, well, ask for permission. And thereafter, in the next line, I call FBM configure. Now let's save this and let's rerun this updated app here on the real iOS device, because as mentioned earlier, you need a real iOS device to test and use push notifications. So here is the app running on my real iOS device, and I will now switch to a different app so that the main app is not in the foreground anymore. And now let's try sending a message. For that, here in the cloud messaging area, I'll duplicate my last notification here, this test notification, and under target, I will now also target another app. I will also target that iOS app here. Click on next, and click on review. Now don't publish it yet, because at the moment this would not work. I could send it, but actually keep in mind that we need to grant our permission first. That's why I'll actually switch back to my Flutter app and instead log in real quick so that I reach this chat screen where I am being asked for permission. Here I am. Now I will grant this permission, and now I will switch away to a different app. So now with the permission granted, we can click publish here. And I do get this push notification here. Does this work? This now is one of the notifications I have here, and if I tap on it, it opens up the Flutter chat app. So this is how we can send push notifications with help of the Firebase Cloud Messaging SDK and service to Flutter apps, both on Android and iOS. Now let's see how we can handle those messages inside of the app.